Hi math students, this is our introduction video for our lesson on proportions. And this is going to be our last lesson on equations. We've been working a lot on equations and this is the final part. To start off, what is a proportion? A proportion is going to be two equal ratios or fractions. So we've talked about ratios back in Unit 1. We said ratios are these comparisons of two numbers. So for example, $5 for 10 apples, that can be written as a ratio. And we learned when you write ratios, there's a couple different ways you can write them. One is a fraction though. And so for example, $5 for 10 apples, that's dollars and apples. That's the same thing as me saying, well, if you're paying $5 for 10 apples, that means you're paying $1 for every 2 apples. And so notice those two fractions I've written are equal fractions. I can say this is a proportional relationship, or this right here, when it's an equation, is a proportion. So you can think of a proportion as a type of equation, specifically an equation where you see a fraction equal to a fraction. And so we can use proportional equations to help us represent different stories, specifically stories that are talking about ratios. For example, we can say Janet can run 2 kilometers in 18 minutes. That right there is one ratio. In this story, we're looking for the other ratio. How long does it take her to run 7 kilometers? Now, when we had talked about equivalent ratios, we said matching up the information is important. So when we did this earlier, we would say 2 kilometers in 18 minutes, kilometers, minutes, and we said when you match up your second ratio, it needs to go in the same place. Earlier when we were doing it, we had stuff like this where we were trying to figure out what number are we multiplying to get that second ratio. Notice here that doesn't work. You can't multiply 2 by something to get 7. But we can solve this instead, now that you know so much about solving equations, with a proportion. I'm going to do it the same way as I did it up here and use fractions. But for that information that's missing, I'll use a variable this time. So to begin, our first ratio there, 2 kilometers in 18 minutes, I'm going to write 2 kilometers in 18 minutes. And I'm going to remember when I'm writing my fractions, my ratios, that top number has to be our kilometers and the bottom number has to be our minutes. I'm trying to figure out if that's the speed she runs at. If she runs at that speed the whole time, she keeps the same rate, the same speed, I'm trying to figure out a second ratio. I am trying to figure out how long does it take her to run 7 kilometers. I'm given 7 kilometers, so I want to match that information. It's going to go on top with my kilometers, but I'm trying to figure out how long does it take. I am trying to figure out the minutes. So this is where I'll use a variable, maybe m, and I'll say m represents the number of minutes it takes. I can even be more specific, number of minutes it takes her to run 7 kilometers. And now I have an equation that I could use to solve and help me answer this question. The other part of today's lesson, in addition to what is a proportion, is how to solve proportions. We learned in our last lesson that when you have equations with fractions, you can use multiplication to help you with the fractions. Specifically, if you have a proportion with 2 fractions, you can do something that's called cross multiply. Cross multiply uses multiplication, and we multiply the things across from each other, like an x. So it means to solve this proportion, to solve this equation that has a fraction equal to a fraction, I would want to multiply 2 by m together and multiply 18 by 7. And those are the two sides of my equation. It does not matter the order, so I'll do 2 times m first, that's 2m, and then 18 times 7, how fun. 18 times 7 is 126. So I get 126 there. After you cross multiply, now we have a really easy equation we can solve. I can finish by dividing both sides by 2, and that gives me my answer, m equals 63, and it must take her 63 minutes to run 7 kilometers. The second big idea in this lesson is this right here. If you want to solve a proportion, you cross multiply. So you do those 2 multiplication problems, and it's always going to give you an easier equation to solve. For this final part, I have one more complex proportion for us to solve, this one right here. Again, I have a fraction equal to a fraction. So I know this is a proportion, and because it's a proportion, I know the first thing I need to do is cross multiply. With cross multiply, that means I need to multiply 4 by x together, and I need to multiply 2 by 5 minus x. I'm curious, go ahead and try doing those 2 multiplication problems. Pause the video now and cross multiply. So when you do that multiplication, 4 times x gives you 4x. And then on your other side, when you multiply 2 times 5 minus x, the difference here is, notice there are 1, 2 terms. We are multiplying 2 by everything up there, by 5 minus x. That multiplication problem is like this. We are multiplying the 2 and the 5 together, but we also need to multiply the 2 and that minus x. And so we get 10 minus 2x. The rest of this is going to be review from what we learned earlier this week about multi-step equations. To finish solving this, I have variables on both sides. So the next thing I want to do is move my variable to one side. Because in this equation, the number is already on this side, it means I'm going to have the right side be my number and the left side be my variable. So I want to cancel the minus 2x plus 2x on both sides. That gives me 6x equals 10. And then I have one final step. The last step, I want to divide the coefficient. To get x by itself, I still need to get rid of my 6, and so I divide both sides by 6. That gets x all by itself. 10 divided by 6, that's going to be a fraction, but we can simplify by dividing by 2, and I get my final answer, 5/3. In today's lesson, we're going to practice all of these things: identifying proportions, representing stories with proportions, and solving proportions by cross multiplying. Thanks so much for watching. You are ready for today's lesson.